Vanishing from a moving bus. A World War II veteran boarded a bus in St. Albans, Vermont in 1949 for the final leg of his journey home and vanished while the vehicle was moving down the highway. What makes this disappearance extraordinary is that he didn't just leave the bus. He somehow disappeared from his seat without anyone noticing, leaving behind all his belongings. The veteran was returning to his home at the Soldiers' Home in Bennington after visiting relatives. He had taken his seat on the bus and settled in for what should have been a routine trip. Multiple passengers saw him during the journey, and the bus driver confirmed he was aboard when they made their second-to-last stop in Burlington. His luggage remained in the overhead compartment, his bus ticket was still in his seat, and a bus timetable sat open on his lap. But when the bus arrived at the Bennington terminal, he was gone. The bus had made no unscheduled stops. The driver never saw him get off. No passengers remembered him leaving. The bus doors had only opened at official stops, and he wasn't seen at any of them. His luggage, ticket, and personal belongings remained exactly where he'd left them. But the man had somehow vanished from a moving vehicle. The case defied all logical explanation. How does someone disappear from a bus seat while traveling down a highway? The bus was essentially a closed system with limited exit points, all of which were monitored. Despite extensive searches of the route and investigations by local police, no trace of James Edward Tedford was ever found. Pilot's final radio transmission. A 20-year-old pilot was flying his Cessna 182 over the Bass Strait between mainland Australia and Tasmania on October 21, 1978, when he radioed about a mysterious aircraft following him. His final transmission was recorded, documenting his encounter with an unidentified object in the moments before he vanished forever. The young aviator was making a routine flight from Moorabbin Airport to King Island when he contacted Melbourne Flight Service at 7:06 p.m. He reported seeing an aircraft with 4 bright lights about 1,000 feet above him. The controller told him no known aircraft were in the area. He described the object as long, metallic, and moving at high speed, saying it was orbiting above him with a shiny metal surface and green light. When the controller asked him to identify the aircraft type, he replied that it wasn't an aircraft at all. It had a long shape and was moving back and forth in ways that defied normal flight patterns. He reported that the object was now approaching him from the east, and his engine was running roughly. The transmission captured him saying the object was hovering on top of me and had a green light. At 7:12 p.m., his final words were recorded. "That strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. It's hovering and it's not an aircraft." The transmission then captured 17 seconds of metallic scraping sounds before contact was lost forever. Despite extensive air and sea searches covering 1,000 square miles, no trace of Frederick Valentich or his aircraft was ever found. The Australian Department of Transport investigated for 4 years, but reached no conclusions about what happened in those final moments above the Bass Strait. Airport security footage shows man's final moments. Security cameras at a Bulgarian airport captured a tourist's final moments in 2014 as he suddenly bolted from a medical center, scaled a fence, and disappeared into a forest. The footage documents the end of a week-long spiral into paranoia that began with a simple ear injury. Lars Matank had been vacationing at Bulgaria's Golden Sands resort when he got into an altercation that ruptured his eardrum. A local doctor prescribed antibiotics and advised him not to fly due to the injury. His friends returned to Germany, but Matank stayed for treatment. His behavior immediately became erratic. He called his mother repeatedly, claiming people were following him and trying to hurt him. Hotel staff reported that Matank seemed paranoid and agitated, constantly looking over his shoulder. On July 8th, airport security footage shows him appearing nervous and checking behind himself repeatedly. The cameras captured him in the airport's medical center, where he sat calmly for several minutes before suddenly jumping up and running at full speed. The final footage shows Matank sprinting through the airport, bursting through doors, and scaling a perimeter fence before disappearing into dense forest. The transition from sitting calmly to full panic took less than 5 seconds with no apparent trigger. Despite extensive searches by Bulgarian police, German investigators, and volunteers, no trace of Matank has been found, making him one of the few people whose final moments are documented on camera. The hiker who found a cave that made him sick. An experienced desert hiker left a comment on a YouTube video in 2014, claiming he had discovered a cave that made him violently ill when he approached it. His obsession with finding this mysterious M-shaped cave again led to his disappearance in the Nevada desert, leaving behind a digital trail that internet users still follow today. Kenny Veach regularly explored remote areas around Las Vegas and was familiar with the harsh desert terrain. In his YouTube comment, he described finding a cave shaped like the letter M that produced strange vibrations and made him dizzy as he approached. When he tried to enter, the sensations became so intense that he had to turn back. He called it his sick cave and said he wanted to return with proper equipment. His comment attracted attention from other hikers and YouTubers. Veach decided to make a video series about finding the cave again, posting several videos showing his search attempts in the rugged terrain near Area 51 and Nellis Air Force Base. In his final video, posted days before his disappearance, he seemed determined, but also appeared stressed about the negative comments he was receiving from viewers who doubted his story. On November 10, 2014, Veach set out alone for another search expedition. His cell phone was found near an abandoned mine shaft, but extensive searches by rescue teams, volunteers, and fellow YouTubers found no other trace of him. The case spawned numerous theories and continued searches by internet communities, but the hiker who documented his own obsession online has never been found. Student disappeared, returned 15 months later with no memory. A cross-country skier set out for a routine winter run along the frozen shores of Lake Michigan in February 1978 and vanished without explanation. What happened next defies all logical understanding and remains one of the most bewildering disappearance cases ever documented. Stephen Kubacki was an experienced skier who knew the terrain well. On February 20th, he left his Hope College dormitory for what should have been a standard skiing session near the lake. His ski tracks were found leading toward the partially frozen water, but they stopped abruptly at the shoreline. No tracks led away from the lake, and no holes were found in the ice. 15 months later, in May 1979, Kubacki was found in a field 700 miles away in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, wearing the same clothes he'd disappeared in. He was holding his backpack and ski poles, but had no memory of the intervening time. Medical examinations showed he was in good health and appeared well-nourished, suggesting someone had cared for him during his absence. Even more disturbing, Kubacki discovered a pile of his own belongings in the field where he was found, including items he didn't remember having with him when he originally disappeared. He underwent extensive psychological evaluation, but showed no signs of mental illness or deception. In a final twist that makes the case even more unsettling, Stephen Kubacki disappeared again in 1999 and has never been found. Phone call documents student's real-time disappearance. A college student was driving home from a party in rural Minnesota in 2008 when his car slid into a ditch. What began as a routine call for help from his parents turned into one of the most haunting disappearance cases in modern history, captured in real time through a 47-minute phone conversation that abruptly ended with his final words. Brandon Swanson called his father after midnight to explain he'd run off the road but wasn't injured. The car wasn't badly damaged, but it was stuck near the small town of Lind. His father agreed to drive out and meet him, but when he arrived at the location Swanson had described, neither his son nor the car were there. The two stayed on the phone while his father searched the area. Swanson began walking toward what he thought were the lights of Lind, describing what he could see to help his father locate him. The conversation continued for 47 minutes as Swanson walked through fields and along rural roads in the darkness. He seemed calm and coherent throughout the call, occasionally mentioning landmarks he could see. At 2:30 a.m., while still on the phone with his father, Swanson suddenly exclaimed, "Oh shit!" The line went dead immediately. His father called back repeatedly, but the calls went straight to voicemail. The next day, searchers found Swanson's car in a completely different location than he'd described. Despite massive search efforts involving hundreds of volunteers, aircraft, and specialized equipment, no trace of Brandon Swanson has ever been found. Coal miner found dead under impossible circumstances. A coal miner left his home in 1980 to buy potatoes at a local shop and never returned. 5 days later, his body was discovered on top of a coal pile 20 miles away, under circumstances so bizarre that they continue to baffle investigators and forensic experts decades later. When police found Zygmunt Adamski's body, he was wearing a suit but missing his shirt, watch, and wallet. His appearance was deeply disturbing. The back of his head, neck, and shoulders were covered with a strange, gel-like substance that couldn't be identified by forensic laboratories. The gel had burned his skin in a pattern unlike anything pathologists had seen before. Even more peculiar, someone had carefully shaved Adamski's beard and trimmed his hair while he was missing, but had done so crudely, as if unfamiliar with how to properly groom a human. His fingernails were also trimmed. The coal pile where he was found was in the middle of a secure yard that would have been impossible to access without keys, yet no footprints or tire tracks led to the location. The autopsy revealed that Adamski had died of a heart attack, but pathologists couldn't explain the burns or the mysterious gel. The substance didn't match any known industrial chemicals or medical treatments. The coroner determined that Adamski had been alive for most of the 5 days he was missing, meaning someone had kept him somewhere during that time. The case was officially closed as death by natural causes, but the physical evidence defied explanation. Shop owner left note saying, "Back in 2 minutes." An antique shop owner placed a handwritten note on her shop door in a Welsh town in 1990 that read, "Back in 2 minutes." She never returned, and her disappearance remains one of the most perplexing, unsolved cases in British criminal history. Trevelyan Evans ran an antique shop called Attic Antiques in Llangollen, Wales. On June 16th, she opened her shop as usual and was seen by neighbors going about her normal routine. Around 1:30 p.m., she placed the note on her shop door and locked up. Security cameras captured her walking toward the town center, but she vanished somewhere between her shop and the main street, a distance of less than 200 yards. The circumstances surrounding her disappearance were deeply unusual. Evans left her handbag, keys, and personal belongings in the shop. Her car remained parked outside. She had made no arrangements to close the shop early and had appointments scheduled for later that afternoon. Most significantly, she left behind her epilepsy medication, which she needed to take regularly and would never have gone anywhere without. Police investigations revealed that Evans had no financial troubles, no known enemies, and no history of mental illness or erratic behavior. Her marriage was stable, and she had no reason to disappear voluntarily. The handwritten note was analyzed and confirmed to be in her handwriting, with no signs of distress or coercion. Extensive searches, interviews with hundreds of witnesses, and multiple police investigations over the decades have found no trace of Trevelyan Evans. Teenager bought one-way ticket to London, never seen again. A 14-year-old boy from Doncaster, England, withdrew £200 from his bank account in 2007, bought a one-way train ticket to London, and vanished without a trace. What makes his disappearance particularly disturbing is that he deliberately left behind his mobile phone and return ticket, suggesting he never intended to come back. Andrew Gosden was described as a gifted, quiet teenager who excelled in mathematics and played piano. On September 14th, he got dressed for school in his uniform but never arrived. Instead, he walked to Doncaster railway station and purchased a ticket to London King's Cross, arriving in the capital around 11:20 a.m. Security footage shows him walking out of the station, but this remains the last confirmed sighting. The circumstances of his departure were methodical and planned. Gosden had accessed his savings account, something he rarely did, and withdrew nearly all of his money. He left his phone at home, which was unusual since teenagers typically never go anywhere without their devices. He also left his return train ticket unused, indicating he had no plans to come back that day. Years later, the investigation took a darker turn when police received leads connecting his case to online predators and the dark web. His family began receiving mysterious messages from people claiming to have information about Andrew, but these communications led nowhere. In 2021, police arrested 2 men in connection with his disappearance, but both were released without charge. The case remains active, with Andrew Gosden representing every parent's nightmare, a child who simply walked away from their normal life and vanished into one of the world's largest cities. Hermit's footprints led to Cliff Edge, then stopped. An advertising executive abandoned his lucrative career in 1982 to become a hermit in the Wyoming wilderness, then disappeared under circumstances that left investigators with more questions than answers. What began as a man seeking solitude in nature ended with a mystery that haunted his family for decades. Don Kemp had worked in Chicago's advertising industry before deciding to retreat from modern life. He moved to a remote cabin in Wyoming's backcountry, living off the grid without electricity or running water. For months, he embraced his solitary existence, occasionally hiking into nearby towns for supplies, but otherwise keeping to himself. On a cold morning in November 1982, Kemp's car was discovered, abandoned on a mountain road, with all his personal belongings still inside. His wallet, identification, winter coat, and survival gear remained untouched in the vehicle. Search teams found his footprints leading away from the car through deep snow, tracking them for nearly 2 miles until they reached the edge of a steep cliff. The footprints stopped abruptly at the cliff's edge, but no body was found below. The tracks showed no signs of struggle or distress. They simply ended. Searchers combed the area for weeks, using helicopters and climbing equipment to examine every possible location where a body might have fallen, but found nothing. Months later, Kemp's family began receiving cryptic phone calls from someone claiming to be Don, but investigators could never trace them or verify their authenticity. Paralyzed man vanished from porch in front of witnesses. A paralyzed man sitting on his sister's front porch in an English village in 1763 vanished without a trace while multiple witnesses worked within sight of the house. Owen Parfitt was completely unable to move due to a massive stroke and had to be carried everywhere, making his disappearance physically impossible. The 60-year-old lived with his sister in Shepton Mallet and spent his days either in bed or sitting outside when the weather was pleasant. On a warm evening in June, his sister and a neighbor carried him to his usual chair on the front porch, wrapping him in his greatcoat. Farm workers were laboring in fields directly across the road, close enough to hear conversations and see anyone approaching the house. Parfitt's sister went inside to complete her chores, leaving him sitting peacefully in his chair. The farm workers continued their tasks throughout the evening, maintaining clear sight lines to the porch. When a storm began approaching, his sister came outside to bring him back in, but discovered he was completely gone. Only his folded greatcoat remained in the chair where she had left him. A paralyzed man cannot simply walk away, yet no one saw anyone approach the house or carry him off. The farm workers across the road witnessed nothing unusual. Despite extensive searches by the entire village, no trace of Owen Parfitt was ever found. The physical constraints of his condition make his disappearance impossible according to normal circumstances, yet the empty chair and remaining coat prove he was there and somehow left. Medical student entered bar on camera, never left. A medical student was captured on security cameras entering a Columbus, Ohio bar in 2006, but was never recorded leaving despite comprehensive video surveillance covering every possible exit. Brian Schaefer walked into the Ugly Tuna Saloon at 1:15 a.m. on April 1st and simply vanished from inside the building. The 27-year-old Ohio State student had had been bar hopping with friends to celebrate spring break when they returned to the Ugly Tuna for a final round. Security cameras recorded all three friends taking the escalator to the second-floor bar entrance. Around 1:55 a.m., cameras captured Schaefer talking briefly with two women outside the bar before stepping back inside just minutes before closing time. The bar had extensive security camera coverage, including both manually operated and continuously panning cameras that monitored all public entrances and exits. When investigators reviewed the footage, they could identify every single patron leaving the establishment that night, except Schaefer. His two friends were clearly recorded departing, but Schaefer never appeared on any exit footage. The only other way out was a service door that led to an active construction site, but even this area had security cameras that showed no sign of Schaefer. The building was essentially a monitored closed system with documented entry and exit points. Investigators stated with certainty that Schaefer never left through the main entrance, yet somehow disappeared from inside a bar with comprehensive video surveillance covering all possible escape routes.